Hey everyone, welcome to my next video. I'm going to be talking about 15 different careers you can get with just MSW without having to get a license. I know that a lot of people are asking questions about some of the options available for MSWs, so I wanted to do this just to kind of highlight some of the many options that you have available. So, first is that of being a program coordinator. And so, the name for this title can be different depending on the setting or the facility that you might be working in. But these people typically work in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and also nonprofit organizations. A lot of times, these roles do not require a clinical license because you are more of overseeing a program. You're kind of dealing more with the logistical side of things. You also may be more tasked with like leadership or administrative duties versus working in a clinical setting or being in a clinical role. So that can be a great option if you don't necessarily want to go the licensure route or you're just at the MSW level and want to kind of see what's available just in general. Another option is that of working in community outreach. And this can also look really different depending on the environment that you're in and really kind of what you're looking for. An area of that would be community organizing, but also working from it for environmental organizations and also various nonprofits that are kind of community focused and really focus on solving some type of social problem. Another option is that of working in politics or political roles. I know that there's a lot happening in the political sector right now, and there's, I think, definitely need for social workers to really, be a voice for marginalized individuals and just to really let our voices be heard. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to, I think, make a difference in some of these areas. Leadership and also having civic training is helpful. There are different, I guess there's different schools, but there's also different certification programs in leadership that can be really helpful when it comes to just kind of getting the skill set that really would help you really maximize your MSW skills within a role within politics. So that's always something kind of great to consider as far as some of the available options. So another example of an option would be working in the research realm in some way. So an option of this would be working as a research assistant, which typically can be on-site or remote. It's also helpful to have a knowledge of quantitative and qualitative analysis software and also working as a research coordinator. That means you would start in graduate school. It's really be important to connect with faculty that have research experience that interest you. That's really a great way to get your foot in the door when it comes to really making those connections and starting that process of working in research. It's also helpful to utilize professional conferences for networking when it comes to your research interest and really kind of collaborating with individuals that may have more experience in that area and just really kind of introducing yourself and becoming more familiar with that type of thing. Another option is that of working in academic advising or in student success. These are roles that can be remote or on site. They often include educational benefits. So, a lot of times, if you want to go back to school for some other degree, they'll offer usually a significant tuition discount or free tuition if you work for the institution. So, that can be a great way to get additional education without incurring any additional debt, just as an available option or benefit to working in an academic or in higher education. An option is that you also get a chance to use your clinical skills a lot of times in a non clinical setting. So even though you're working with students in academia, you're also using your social work skills to hopefully help, from a case management lens, but also just connecting them sometimes to the resources that they need and really kind of just being that listening ear as they're going through, their academic time there at the institution. And also, there's typically upward mobility. There's different departments that you can move to, and a lot of times, different options can open up just because you're already within the institution. And if they decide to hire internally, you get priority when it comes to having your application looked at too. So that can be an additional benefit of working in an academic advising or student success role. Another option is working as a grant writer, and that typically requires additional training and additional experience. However, in that role, you can work for an organization or for a freelancer. Having a clinical license really doesn't matter per se as a grant writer, especially when you're, assisting organizations. They really just want to know that you have the writing skills and you have the expertise to really help them. It's also can be a great option for individuals who really want to work more on a macro level with systems and with kind of higher level interventions. This can be a great option. It's also really helpful if you have good writing skills and also storytelling ability when it comes to grant writing. So, if you tend to write a lot and you really enjoy that process, grant writing might be a really good fit for you. And it's something that doesn't typically require a license or even sometimes a clinical background. Um, Another option is working kind of in school or educational social work, and that would be kind of like a K through 12 setting in some way. So typically for school social work, it does require an additional test after your master's degree, depending on the requirements of the state that you live in. However, there's also roles also in different schools that aren't necessarily school social work, but they are supportive roles, or they're centered around mental health, wellness, or just connecting the kids to resources outside of the school. That can be working as a support staff aide or even a substitute teacher. One thing to keep in mind is that private schools, boarding schools, and charter schools can have different educational requirements for working as a school social worker. So those are can sometimes be options if you don't necessarily always have the license in hand and you want to do something that's a little bit different. They typically have different requirements, and they don't always require you to have a clinical license if you're working in a private setting at a private school or a boarding school or something like that. So that also is, I think, a great avenue to consider. The great thing is that your social work skills are very transferable in a classroom setting or in a school setting. And so it can be a really easy transition into the field of education from social work, because there is a lot of overlap with what educators do and also what social workers do. Another option is working in nonprofit work, and that would be working for faith based nonprofits, which would be churches, could be charity organizations, or also world outreach organizations. It really can vary depending on the denomination and their focus and what their mission is. Another option for nonprofit work is working in remote or on site. Typically, um, I would say nonprofit work has been more hybrid now that I'm seeing like more positions being posted. I'm seeing more of a hybrid model, or a lot of them used to be purely remote, but I am seeing more and more nonprofits going to more of a hybrid setting or going more on site. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're really focused on, working remotely. Sometimes different nonprofits can have different residency requirements and kind of have more stipulations around like where you live and why. So another option for nonprofit work is working kind of in a healthcare diagnosis specific nonprofit organization. I think specifically of, I believe it's the Susan Komen Foundation for Breast Cancer, where it's a nonprofit that's centered around a specific diagnosis. And there are like roles that social workers can apply for that don't necessarily have the word social worker, but are really relevant to the work that we do as social workers. That can be a great option when it comes to something that doesn't require a clinical background or a clinical license, but you still get a chance to use your social work skills. Some other additional options include educational nonprofits, mental health nonprofits, and also child and youth based organizations. And so, with all of those things, I think it's just important to keep your options open and ask questions. You may find that the role doesn't necessarily say the role social worker, but if you search by some of the skills that you have, which are social work skills, you'll find different roles that maybe pop up. However, the job title might look different than that of being a social worker. So keep your eyes open, but also I would say, just keep your options open as well. So, some tips for success that I want to talk about is just really invest in having a resume professionally done, making sure that it's a really great representation of you as a person and you and your clinical focus or lack of clinical focus, and really identifying what that focus is. Make sure to highlight any transferable skills, even if they aren't related to social work. So, if social work happens to be a second career for you in some way, it's always a good idea to kind of talk about some of the skills that you maybe gained from another field that you were in before, or previous experiences that you had before you became a social worker. It's also helpful, I think, to be flexible at the location. While more people are looking for remote roles, I think sometimes hybrid or on site can be really helpful, especially when we think about mental health and the rates of burnout with social work. Sometimes having like a 20-minute commute can be just a great way to kind of woosah from the day. And so I think there's some value in having like a small commute, just so that you have that physical distance between like work life and home life. But that's my personal opinion. But yeah, that can be something just to keep in mind when it comes to looking for roles as an MSW. Please feel free to join my Patreon. I'd love to see you there. I post roles for MSWs and all types of mental health related roles there. So I'd love to see you there. It's called The Pivoted Path. Again, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.